Hello, everybody. I'm back, and it's been a little bit. I've been spending a lot of my time just doing shorts and trying to figure out lots of other things in my life and working hard. But I thought about a topic that really touched my heart. And I thought I would share it with you guys. It's about victims back in the day that also suffered along with the Jews um, from the Nazi regime. Not many people know about this. Everybody thinks about, it was just the Jews and maybe other people too, but nobody really talks about these guys. They call them the purple triangles. They're the ones that they didn't wear the star, but they wore purple triangles to point them out. These are the forgotten victims of the Nazi regime, basically. Um, who were they? Well, they were basically Jehovah's Witnesses. And no one really talks about this much. Not too much at all. Um, like a forgotten history that nobody really talks about. Well, right here, supposedly by the end of 2022, about 600,000 visitors, many young people among them, had seen the traveling exhibits about the persecution of the prisoners with the purple triangle and others of Jehovah's Witnesses in the Third Reich. The exhibit was staged at Memorial Museum of former concentration camps such as oh my God. um there are many different concentration camps with different names here, basically, and it says as well as in adult education centers and other educational institutions. So they don't talk about it that much. They mainly talk about the Jews that suffered. They don't talk about other people that suffered with them. And it says this effort was important and instrumental in saving these basically they are called the forgotten victims, as German historians call them, because not many people, they're not very known, basically. Not many people talk about them, like historical wise, because they only thought that Jews suffered, but many people suffered with them too. And these are some of the forgotten ones. And it says, as German historians call them, from oblivion, what further benefits come from the presentation of such an exhibit to the public? Well, oh, right here it goes on January 27th, 1998, an annual commemoration day for the victims of National Socialism. The Memorial Museum at this certain camp, I can't pronounce. It's a very difficult word. Dedicated the day to victims who were Jehovah's Witnesses. Speaking at this occasion, Stefan Reichi, Minister of Culture and Science in Brandenburg, stated, the behavior of Jehovah's Witnesses in the camps and prisons embodies virtues which today and in the past are essential to the continued existence of a democratic constitutional state founded on the rule of law, namely, um, their firm stand against the SS and the I'm sorry, and the consideration towards their fellow inmates. Given the increasing brutality towards aliens and towards persons having a different political or sorry, um, philosophical outlook, these virtues are a must for every citizen in our country. Huh? Basically, they went through bitter persecution for a religious minority, basically minority, a religious minority under the Nazi regime. Basically, they suffered because they refused um, the regime. They refused if they had to go to war, they refused. If they told them, they refused on anything that had to do against God's law. They refused it. And it goes right here. It says, one speaker said, all persons depicted can only be mentioned on behalf of the many who were persecuted, imprisoned, and tormented because they firmly held their religious convictions and did not adapt to the National Socialist surroundings. It says they are no remote or untouchable heroes, but ordinary people, mortal like anybody else, who followed their conscience, stood up boldly for their convictions, and hence became good examples for our everyday life. Wow. Basically, these forgotten victims, um, historians have been referring to Jehovah's Witnesses as forgotten victims of the Nazi regime because they don't talk about us too much. They don't talk about other people that suffered along because they refused what the Nazis were doing and they refused to be part of it. And spiritual resistance out of Christian conviction. As we done as an accompanying exhibit of scientific forms with the same titles, and they have like different, names of concentration camps, and there was so much that they went through, and some 400 of the 567 presentations included a traveling exhibit about the forgotten victims on January 23rd, 1998. At the opening of the exhibit. Wow. And it says Jehovah's Witnesses to whom we owe respect. Respect which was somehow underexposed for a long time. Therefore, I am happy about this exhibit that can help uh, com- compensate basically what other people suffered along with them. And sadly, it goes Jehovah's Witnesses have a definite and exemplary place in the chapter that otherwise is the saddest chapter of basically German history. Yep. Okay. And this goes right here. The extent of loyalty towards state was a it's basically initiated their persecution. And it says it is striking that no other religious sect suffered as much under National Socialism as did the earnest Bible students. Wow. It says the distribution of the resolution on December 12th, 1936, and the opening letter on June 20th, 1937, were not only a very spectacular but also a new way of public preaching. These were campaigns throughout the Reich that were so well coordinated that they could take place all over Germany on the same day and at the same time. Throughout the whole Nazi era in Germany, there was no other resistance organization that took comparable initiatives. As a totalitarian state, it required that people give their full devotion to the right to I'm sorry to the regime. They had to give um their full devotion to the regime at that time. And it says the Hitler government had placed itself in position of God and demanded that the entire national community be in be in harmony, with the Führer, whatever you want to call it. And resistance became a mandatory dictate of self-esteem and self assertion. for the religious denominations of Jehovah's Witnesses at that time. As early as in um, the Weimar Republic, Jehovah's Witnesses were exposed to the hostilities of racial na nationalistic forces. The church and the first legal measures from the state, although in 1933 the IBV, oh, International Bible Students, that's what we were called back then, tried to adapt to the new situation and declared their strictly non-political and anti-communist nature, and basically harsh conflicts with the government agencies soon followed. Already the spring of 1933 saw heavy persecution, confiscations, and bans of publishing, preaching, and organizing. So basically in 1933 they started to basically persecute, confiscate a lot of their teachings materials, and they banned their preaching work. They didn't really stop them, no matter what they did. Still the same today. The first thing we can learn from the attitudes of Jehovah's Witnesses in Nazi Germany is that a small group, relying on their faith and resolution, solidarity, succeeded in withdrawing from the Nazi regime's basically from their grasp. And of course, they did pay a high price for that. They were put in concentration camps. Some of them were even put to death. And it says, second, it should be an obligation for us, the generation born after the Third Reich, to ensure that people will never again have to die to remain true to their conscience. We all have a conscience that we think with. We know when something doesn't feel right. And sometimes we have to stand up. And sadly, in some situations, in some countries, it might even mean your life for that. And this is what they experienced. Basically, bands, this is called the bands. Flourishing congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses, Bible students in Germany before 1933. Oh my gosh. Because of their intense preaching activity, they were well known among the populace. They were basically well known for their preaching work, and we still are known for it the same way. Hasn't changed. As early as 1933, Jehovah's Witnesses' refusal to participate in elections and to give the Hitler salute, as well as the religious activities in spite of governmental bans, resulted in the first repressive measures for the witnesses and even detention in concentration camps. They were put into detention in concentration camps. So they were put in concentration camps just as much as the Jews were. The Jews had the yellow star, the Jehovah's Witnesses had the purple triangle. On October 7th, 1934, Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany and in 50 other countries sent about 20,000 letters and telegrams to the German government protesting the persecution. The telegrams from abroad reads as follows, and it goes: Hitler's government, Berlin, Germany. Your ill treatment of Jehovah's Witnesses shock all the good people of the earth and dishonors God's name. Refrain from further persecuting Jehovah's Witnesses. Otherwise, God will destroy you and your national party. Signed, Jehovah's Witnesses. Basically, that was like telegrams they sent out back when, just to let them know what they were doing was wrong and you need to stop. You're making them suffer. For what? For being loving in a world that could be so ugly to you. Underground. Many witnesses, such as Max and Conrad Frankie, practiced their faith in spite of persecution. Some duplicating Watchtower literature underground. Conrad was taken to the camp at Osthofen. I don't know what they have some weird. Well, he was sent to a concentration camp in 1933. And then he was sent to another concentration camp in 1934. So basically, he was at the concentration camp all the way from 1936 another concentration camp in 1936 and 1945. Whereas their father Max was they moved the father to another concentration camp, separating them in 1934. And then to another concentration camp, the father in 1935. Maria Humbunch served as an underground courier. In February 1940, she was sentenced to 3.5 years of prison time, which she spent in solitary confinement. The judiciary set her free in 1943 after her Catholic parents pleaded the clemency. She discreetly continued her witness activities until 1945. Wow, that's interesting. And then it says on December 12th, 1936, Jehovah's Witnesses disputed a printing resolution all over Germany protesting the persecution. On June 20th, 1937, the open letter followed containing more details. And these are the children. How many children suffered along because, their parents were put in concentration camps or put in prisons. And let me see. Anelius Gross, something like that. Um, she was born in 1938. Not only lost her father, he was beheaded in Berlin. Oh my God, that's terrible. December 22nd, 1939. But she was also torn away from her mother in January 1940. Without prior notice, she was picked up from her home and taken to a Nazi education school. Berthold Maues, he was born in 1930. Mother was taken to a concentration camp. His father was forced to hand his son over to the officials, who met his parents again in 1945 when he was 15 years old. Remembers, the Nazi entrusted me to the care of a childless couple who lived on a small farm. In the morning, I went to school, and in the afternoon, I worked on the farm until 1943. I was allowed to write to my parents only once every 6 months. Then all correspondence was forbidden. Wow. In 1939, Elizabeth Paul Gerhard and Hans Werner, the Cosroe family's youngest children, were picked up from school and from their home by officials who placed them in reform school. The school report states conduct very good. To this day, Paul Gerard refused to give the German salute, and he has not participated in the hosting of the flag. Basically, they didn't do the Heil Hitler. They didn't participate in like um saluting to a flag because we don't do that. After Germany annexed, refused to give the Hitler salute. Because he refused to give the Hitler salute on July 7th, 1943, he was taken away from his parents and confined in a Nazi reform school in in a certain place in Germany. They have those complicated names. Oh my gosh. The National Socialists took Eugene Jung, which they were born in 1933 in Gomlang, France. His parents and his 5 siblings to Upper Silesia. They had refused to give the Hitler salute and to hang swastika flags in their window of their homes. The picture of Simone Arnold was taken shortly before her mother had to take the 11-year-old girl to a reform school near Constance. Wow. The father had already been sent to a concentration camp. The girls' shoes were taken away immediately. The children walked barefoot from Easter until fall. Wow. The older children had to do hard work in the house and in the garden. And Simon recalls, we never played. We had no personal belongings. And speaking was forbidden. If a pupil was caught, he was severely beaten on his fingers with a stick. Ooh, imprisonment. Proceeding, I guess these are concentration camps. There's like different concentration camps here. Was one of the early concentration camps for women, 1933 to 1937. Nearly half of the known women at Morrigan were Jehovah's Witnesses. Among the Morrigan inmates was 32-year-old Katharina Fonis. Uh, the dictator isolated her and her fellow witnesses from the others and enforced a correspondence, parcel, and money ban because the women refused to do sewing for winter relief work. Basically, they refused to do um, things that had to do anything to supporting the Reich. So they refused to sew them winter relief work. So they refused to do work for them because that means they were supporting their efforts and they refused to do that. Because he refused to pledge allegiance to the Fuhrer, 18-year-old Jonathan Stark was taken to the youth concentration camp of Morrigan in 1944. On November 1st, 1944, he was hanged as a conscientious objector. Wow. He was hung. He was only 18. He didn't even make it to 20 yet. Just for his faith because he refused to take part in such an ugly um regime. He didn't want to be part of it. He didn't want to put alliance to it or anything. Their faith was to God, and that was it. And they knew with their conscience that what the Reich was doing was wrong, and they weren't going to be part of it. And they stood up strong, even if it meant their life. In May 1939, shortly before the camp's dissolution, more than 40% of the female prisoners in Lichtenberg, something like that, were Jehovah's Witnesses. Erna Ludolf, and many other females were taken to Ravensbrück, May 1939, in order to help um, construct a new concentration camp there. So basically, they went to the concentration camp to build another concentration camp. That's crazy. And it goes at Ravensbrück. The woman had to work under the severest circumstances taken from the SS propaganda photo album. Oh my God. Um, and it goes, there's a lot of stuff that happened, and they basically suffered multiple things because they refused. Um, there are many people that suffered here. There's so many names, so many people that were put in concentration camps, put in prisons, were hung, executed, and they were called um, Jehovah's Witnesses with the purple triangle. They were in the concentration camps along with the Jews. You can tell them apart because the Jews had the stars. Jehovah's Witnesses had the purple triangle. If you notice, there was barely any other faith in there because they took part in the Reich because they were scared of the Reich. But the Jehovah's Witnesses stood up strong. They refused, even if it meant their life, because they knew what they were doing was wrong and they weren't going to be part of it. They weren't going to have that on their conscience. We all have a conscience. If we use it well or not, I guess that's up to us, but we know when something doesn't feel right. And when something doesn't feel right, in your heart, you feel like you're falling apart if you don't fix it, if you don't make it right, even if it means you take the consequences for your conscience working for you. See right here, it says in front of all prisoners assembled in a roll call square at oh my God. That's a long name. I'm not gonna even say it. It was a certain concentration camp. It says Augustus Dick Dickman, one of Jehovah's Witnesses, was shot on September 15th, 1939, by order of Reich Himmler, an SS, for being a conscious objector. And shortly thereafter, newspapers in Germany and abroad reported about this police judgment. Wow. There was, oh wow, there was different situations where there are many brothers that were shot to death. Why? Because they were objectors. They were people that went against the Reich. People that were just neutral. They just didn't want to be part of that stuff. They didn't want to be involved in it. They didn't like it. And they let their conscience work for them. And they knew in Jehovah's eyes it wasn't right. And they weren't going to take part, even if it meant their life. How can you live with yourself knowing you're taking part in something that is wrong? I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't live with myself if I knew that. No way. And it says after 52 years, and these are the survivors. After 52 years, Anastasia Kazak left Ukraine, and Herman Skimet met in Moscow. Okay. And they made a, okay. Oh, Anastasia became one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the Stutthof concentration camp. See, like I said, wherever there's a witness, the teachings don't stop. You, I mean, when witnesses do their preaching work, they go to prisons, they go to jails, they go everywhere just to spread the news, the truth of God, to people who want to hear. Some people don't, and we walk away. Simple as that, you know? But it says Anastasia became okay in the concentration camp, and they both had survived the dangerous journey of camp inmate across the Baltic Sea of Denmark. Interesting. It says when the this is interesting. It says when the Ravensbrück camp was evacuated, Oi Al Alice Mosher from Braunau, Austria, and 25 fellow witnesses were ordered to accompany an SS transport. During the night, the guards disappeared in Schwerin, and it says Ali Alois Mosher met a number of Jehovah's Witnesses who had joined the Death March. Starting out from northern Germany, he made his long way home to Austria. Gertrude Ott from Denzing was a prisoner in the camp in Auschwitz. 1942, December 1942 to January 1945. Mauthausen Rosen, after her liberation, she attended the Watchtower Bible School of Gilead in New York and became a missionary serving in Indonesia, Iran, and Luxembourg. So as you can see, some were put to death, some were persecuted. Some of them survived, but still kept their faith. They never stopped. And they were put in a concentration camp, and you know what? They kept going. They kept going with their faith. They didn't let nothing stop them. Just like today. If there's a ban, we still keep going, but we do it more quietly on the down low. You don't ever stop. The truth, no matter how, it will go out one way or another. The truth doesn't stop. No matter a ban, execution, persecution, somebody else will stand up and take its place. So, but at the same time, we all have a conscience. And when we know something is wrong, and we know it's against the laws of God, God taught us to be loving, not ugly in our ways, cruel and wicked. There are so many people after they were released from the concentration camps because now the war was over. They all went on to live very good lives. But after they still kept on with their faith, they never stopped. Okay, the cost of resistance. The religious community, numbering 25,000 souls in Germany, was banned in 1933. About half of them continued their preaching work underground. Jehovah's Witnesses refused to give the Hitler salute and especially refused to perform military service. They were persecuted mercifully. About 10,000 were arrested. The resistance of this group, which also tried to inform the population about the criminal character of the Nazi state by distributing leaflets in the year 1936-37, and thus acted against the regime of injustice beyond their own interest, cost them about 1,200 lives. So many got the truth out, and because of the witnesses, and it meant their very lives because of it. So as it said like 1,200 lives were taken because of that. So when you think about the the days of Hitler and the regime and all that crazy, the SS, and um, always remember that there were other people that suffered with the Jews, the ones that refused. And of course, they were Jehovah's Witnesses. They were the ones that refused to be part of such an ugly act that the regime was acting out. They were persecuting people. They were putting them in concentration camps. And like I said, the Jews had the stars on them, but the Jehovah's Witnesses had the purple triangle. So, and the the Jehovah's Witnesses, you know who they were? Some of them might have been Jews, but I think the majority of them were naturally just Germans. But because they refused to be part of such an act, they refused to salute to Hitler, or the put a flag or Hitler flag or some sort of German or whatever the thing is outside their windows. They refused it because we don't salute to flags. We don't put our life to a flag. We put our life to God. It's like when you put your life to a flag, you're basically, it's like, how do you put it? Like you're putting your life to an idol. A piece of, even though each country has a flag, it's something somebody made with their hands in the long run. And we're not supposed to. Even we're supposed to give our worship and total dedication to our God, Jehovah God, and give thanks to Jesus for um, giving us a hope for the future, for better things ahead, because he gave his life for us. And because he gave his perfect life for us, we have a hope. And we know that. The Bible teaches that. There is a hope for the future, better things ahead. The system that we're living in is basically, it says, what was that verse? Um, basically the wicked one is ruling this world. Who is that? It's Satan. Satan is an influence to the system of things at this moment. That's why the world is so crazy. He's been an influence, but there is going to be a time where only only God knows the time that he's going to act, and he's finally going to end all the wickedness, and he's going to put it to its end. And Jehovah says, um, well, he put his son, Jesus, and gave him authority, even though, everybody confuses who's God, who's Jesus. Jesus is very important to us too. You have to know God and you have to know Jesus. If you don't know both of them, how do you know the truth? People, like in the scriptures, it says, what is it? Um, Man is higher than woman. Jesus is higher than man, but God is higher than Jesus. So where did they come up with this Trinity stuff? I don't, we don't believe in the Trinity, and it makes no sense with scripture. Not at all. But like I said, Jesus is very important because he gave his life willingly for us. So we thank Jehovah for giving us Jesus. And I know that had to be painful to see his son suffer the way he did. But Jehovah loved his creation, the world so much that he was willing to do that. And at the same time, Jesus was willing to do that because he loved what his father loved. So it was a willing sacrifice. It was a willing, because he knew that it gave us a hope. So thank goodness. But like I said, that's a part of history that not many people talk about. So I thought I would bring that up. I know there are other things I want to talk about too, but them and that was the main topic I wanted to talk about tonight. Because I found it very interesting. And most people talk about only Jews suffered. It wasn't just the Jews. It was Jehovah's Witnesses and many people that went against the Reich. So, um, I hope you got something out of this little history fact. I found it I found it interesting. And like I said, I love history. And when I find something that's interesting to me, I like to share it. Why not? It's knowledge. It's more knowledge given. So, um, if you got anything out of this video, you know, any sort of um knowledge that you didn't know before, a little history fact, um, I don't know, just spend the time, I have a lot of other videos too. Um, but I found this one very interesting because it had a history fact behind it. It was nice seeing you guys tonight. I haven't been on here doing this for a little bit, but like I said, I've been doing mostly um like my shorts, and I've been working hard, and it's just been a lot of stuff. Thank you. Have a good night. Adios. Adios, adios.